Good afternoon. A few weeks ago, I introduced to you this book, The Wisdom and Wit of Rabbi Jesus. And I also told you at that time that I made it a practice, and still do, for the most part, to read a biography of Jesus every year. And I'm going to share with you another one of those biographies that I read today. Now, if you're going to be an avid reader, one of the things you have to conclude is that you're not going to agree with every word written by anybody. And so you just have to accept that sometimes you can find nuggets of inspiration and nuggets of truth in books that, plenty of it you disagree with. I feel like that a lot, that there's a book that inspires me, it has this and that in it, but I don't agree with every word. And so that's the only way to be a serious reader, is to read with some conviction and some conscience. And so years ago, I picked up this book, which is another in my series of books that are biographies of Jesus, called Jesus the Prophet by R. David Kaylor. And this book is copyrighted 1993. I didn't buy it in 93. I got it from a used bookstore. I remember the used bookstores actually got the name in the front here. This would have been, I picked it up in 2002 or 2003, okay? So I read this 22 years ago or thereabouts. What Dr. Kaylor does is he frames the life of Jesus inside politics. Not our politics, but the politics of Jesus' day. And he calls it a political interpretation of Jesus. And, each chapter begins with a quote from one of the Gospels. So here, this chapter 1, begins with this quote: "We have no king but Caesar." I'm going to read you a bit. The Gospel of John portrays a scene during the proceedings against Jesus in which Pilate asked, in response to the crowd's demand that they crucify Jesus, "Shall I crucify your king?" And the people reply, "We have no king but Caesar." The scene provides an outstanding example of John's use of irony, in which the speaker stands self-condemned. John's irony raises historical and theological questions. Would it be possible to have any other king as long as Caesar was king? Could a Messiah of any sort coexist with Caesar's rule? Could God's kingdom, with or without a Messiah, coexist with Caesar's rule? If Jesus were identified as Messiah, or if Jesus preached the kingdom of God, was execution the inevitable result? Or was Jesus executed because the Romans misunderstood him and his message? Well, you can tell he has a lot of questions he's going to unpack in this chapter, just a little bit more. Most traditionally, and most scholarly interpretations of Jesus say no. Jesus' execution took place either because his intentions were misunderstood, one, or because the religious leaders were jealous or afraid of his influence with the people. The thesis of this book is that, as a matter of historical truth, the Romans, in conjunction with the Jewish political leaders, had good reason to execute Jesus. Jesus' words and actions called for radical social and political change. In addressing concrete social and political issues of his day, Jesus posed a sufficient threat to the authorities, so much that they feared his influence. Well, I think you can get a pretty good idea of where this book is going to take us eventually. I want to read you one other section. Luke 23, somewhere in Luke 23, in the upper verses, 1 through 7, somewhere along in there. It is said that Jesus stirred up the people by his teachings. And, I think you can see that as evident all through the New Testament, or all through the Gospels, is that Jesus, when he taught and the people heard him, he did ruffle some feathers. I'm going to read a little bit from this section. The way Jesus addressed concrete problems and issues of his day led the religious and political authorities to execute him as a troublemaker. In this chapter, I will argue that although Jesus' reported teachings contain no overt call for revolution, the political and religious authorities correctly perceived that his message posed a threat to the existing order. I intend to show that Jesus' teachings confirm a social, political understanding of the kingdom of God, that they contain underlying elements strongly critical of Israel's social and economic situation under Roman rule. Jesus advocated the cause of the poor and the powerless against the wealthy and powerful elites that governed under Roman rule. He shared a perception common in Israel's prophetic heritage that the rich gain their riches at the expense of the poor. I'll skip ahead just a moment. Omitting the concreteness of Jesus' teachings may have the consequences of transforming them into a universal ethic that can be applied to any situation. But it can also render his teachings spiritual or otherworldly. This is a point that he makes great emphasis of. He believes Jesus was a very concrete, practical teacher of the people of Israel and the people who followed him. And that over the course of time, the church has spiritualized a lot of what Jesus said. Spiritualized is another way of saying making it not concrete. That it was concrete for the hearers of that day, and that it is more spiritual for us in this day. Some people make that distinction loudly and often. This particular person doesn't take that. He doesn't settle that as truth. That Jesus was giving concrete solutions both then and now. And I'm running out of time here, so I'm just going to read one more selection. It's sort of at the end of the book. Jesus' vision was too large for his time, or really any time. It remains as challenge more than achievement. That's true. This gospel is more of a challenge still than actually we've achieved it. No age, no people have actually practiced it, for it may finally be impractical. And by impractical, I think he's sort of alluding to the idea that it's in the hands of us, it cannot be practiced accurately and correctly for any given length of time. Even the most just do not fully achieve the justice of the kingdom. Not even the most peaceful secure the peace promised in its vision. Yet its power to evoke sympathetic response in many persons in various ages show that it is not irrelevant. It remains relevant as vision, offering criticism of the present and promise of the future. It lies beyond, and yet it demands to be present. Love that last line. The gospel does lie beyond us, but it yet demands us to live in the present. I think this is a very interesting read. All right? I don't pick it up nearly as much as I once did, but I did find it on the shelf and thought, for a period of time in my life, I couldn't put this book down. It's got this piece of artwork too I need to show you on the front. Just a very moving piece of artwork. Take a look at it if you can. Jesus the Prophet.